A 7-year-old homeless girl grabbed a millionaire's pregnant wife by the wrist at a garden party and whispered 5 words that would expose a murder plot spanning 3 continents. Don't drink the smoothie. This dirty, starving child, who'd been sleeping in parks and eating from trash cans, could see poison that was invisible to everyone else. She had a gift that defied logic, a curse passed down through African ancestral wisdom that allowed her to sense danger before it struck. But here's what shattered me. That millionaire was her father. A man who didn't know she existed. A man whose own father had poisoned her mother's cancer treatment and left his granddaughter to die on the streets like forgotten folklore, like the lost children in ancient African tales who carried gifts the world feared. What happened next exposed a family dynasty built on blood, a trafficking network hiding in plain sight, and a little girl's supernatural ability that would save over 500 children and bring down an empire. This is the true story of how one African child's ancestral gift, the kind our grandmothers warned us about in Moonlight Tales, turned a multi-millionaire's world upside down and proved that some folktales aren't myths. They're prophecies waiting to come true. Stay until the end, because what the girl discovered about her father's family will haunt you forever. You are here, family. Welcome to Lifetales by Sally. It's clear you love a deep dive. I put dozens of hours into researching these stories. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 100 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe to Lifetales by Sally, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The garden party at the Izzy estate had been flowing perfectly until that moment. Wealthy guests mingled beneath white silk canopies, their laughter mixing with classical music from the string quartet. Isabella Izzy, 6 months pregnant and glowing in her emerald dress, had been making her rounds with practiced grace. Her husband, Alexander Izzy, stood across the lawn discussing a merger with investors, completely unaware that death had just brushed past his wife. Claire had slipped through the iron gates an hour earlier, drawn by something she couldn't explain. The homeless child lived in the parks and alleys of the city, surviving on instinct and the strange ability that had kept her alive since her mother's death. She could sense danger the way others felt rain coming. A tingling in her fingertips, a metallic taste on her tongue, a knowing that settled in her bones. Security hadn't noticed her small frame weaving through the hedges. She'd been watching the party with hungry eyes, not for the food but for the warmth of families together, when the sensation hit her. It started as a whisper in her mind, then grew into a scream. Her gaze locked onto the smoothie table where a server was preparing drinks, and she saw it, not with her eyes but with something deeper. "Let go of me," Isabella said, trying to pull free, but Claire held firm. The child's eyes, gray and ancient beyond her years, fixed on the glass. "There's something wrong with it. Please, ma'am, don't drink it." Guests had begun to notice the commotion. A woman in pearls gasped. A man in a tailored suit stepped forward, ready to remove the dirty child from the pristine event. But Claire ignored them all, her attention focused on the glass. In the sunlight, she could see it now, a faint crystalline residue clinging to the rim, nearly invisible unless you knew to look. Alexander reached them first, his protective instincts flaring. "What's going on here? Who is this child?" He moved to shield his wife, his hand already reaching for his phone to call security. "The glass, sir," Claire said, her voice steady despite her trembling body. "Look at the rim. There's poison on it." The word sent a ripple through the crowd. Poison. At a garden party. In broad daylight. It seemed absurd, like something from a thriller novel, not real life in their world of manicured lawns and trust funds. Isabella looked down at the glass, then at the child gripping her wrist. Something in those gray eyes made her pause. She'd built her career as a prosecutor on reading people, on trusting her instincts about truth and lies. This filthy, frightened child wasn't lying. "Everyone step back," Alexander commanded, his CEO voice cutting through the murmurs. He carefully took the glass from his wife's hand, holding it up to the light. The crystalline residue caught the sun, glittering like tiny diamonds along the rim. His blood ran cold. Security arrived, flanking the smoothie station. The server who'd prepared the drink, a young man in black and white catering uniform, had gone pale, his eyes darting toward the garden exit. He bolted. He didn't make it far. 2 security guards tackled him before he reached the gate, and as they pulled him up, a small vial fell from his pocket, shattering on the stone path. The acrid smell confirmed what Claire had sensed. Poison, carefully measured, meant to look like a tragic accident. A pregnant woman having a medical emergency. Nothing suspicious. Alexander pulled his wife close, his heart hammering. If Claire hadn't intervened, if Isabella had taken even one sip. He couldn't finish the thought. The police were called. Guests were ushered to a separate area for statements. And through it all, Claire stood silently watching, her small shoulders bearing a weight no child should carry. Isabella knelt before her, ignoring the grass stains on her expensive dress. "You saved my life," she said softly, reaching out to touch the child's face. "You saved my baby's life." "How did you know?" Claire's eyes filled with tears. "I just knew. I always know when bad things are about to happen. My mama said it was a gift, but it feels like a curse sometimes." "Where is your mama now, sweetheart?" "She died. 6 months ago. Cancer." The words came out flat, rehearsed from repetition. Claire had learned that saying it quickly hurt less than drawing it out. Alexander's phone buzzed. The police had identified the server, a hired criminal with connections to organized crime, paid handsomely to execute what should have been the perfect murder. But why? Who wanted Isabella dead? As the investigation began, Alexander couldn't take his eyes off Claire. Something about her felt familiar. The shape of her face, the gray eyes, even the way she tilted her head when listening. A memory tugged at him, distant and painful, of another woman with gray eyes, another time when he'd been young and foolish and desperately in love. The party dissolved into chaos. Ambulances arrived as a precaution. Crime scene technicians swarmed the Smoothie station. And Claire, exhausted from the adrenaline and the weight of her gift, swayed on her feet. Isabella caught her before she fell. "You're coming home with us," she declared, looking at her husband. Alexander nodded, already pulling out his phone to call their family doctor. There would be questions later. Legal questions about custody and care, but right now, this child needed safety. In the back of their limousine, Claire pressed her face against the window, watching the estate disappear behind them. She'd never been in a car this nice, never sat on leather this soft. Part of her wondered if she was dreaming, if the hunger and cold of the streets had finally broken her mind. But Isabella's hand, warm and real, rested on her shoulder. "You're safe now," the woman murmured. "Whatever happens next, you're safe." Claire wanted to believe her. But the tingling in her fingertips hadn't stopped, and the metallic taste lingered on her tongue. The danger wasn't over. It had only just begun. At the Izzy mansion, staff prepared a room while the doctor examined Claire. Malnourished but resilient, he concluded. Traumatized but strong. She needed food, rest, and time to heal. As he left, Alexander stood in the doorway of the guest room, watching the small figure curled under blankets that probably cost more than everything Claire had ever owned. "We need to find out who sent that man," Isabella said from behind him, her hand protectively over her belly. "Someone tried to kill me today. Kill our baby." Alexander's jaw clenched. "I'll find out. I promise you that." But even as he spoke, his eyes drifted back to Claire, to those gray eyes that reminded him so much of Tracy. Tracy K-eyes. The name hit him like a physical blow. It had been 8 years since his father had forced him to end that relationship, threatened to destroy her if he didn't walk away. He'd been 22, weak, and terrified of Harold Izzy's power. So he'd left, breaking both their hearts, never knowing. "What was your mother's name?" he asked Claire suddenly, stepping into the room. The child looked up at him, exhausted but alert. "Tracy. Tracy K-eyes." The room tilted. Alexander gripped the doorframe, his knuckles white. Isabella moved to his side, concern etched on her face, but he couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Claire was his daughter. The gift, the gray eyes, the familiar features he'd been trying to place. It all made horrible, perfect sense. Tracy had been pregnant when he'd left her. She'd tried to tell him, had called and written, but his father had intercepted everything. And now Tracy was dead, their daughter had been living on the streets, and someone had just tried to murder his wife. The connections started forming in his mind, dark and terrible. His father, his brother Kevin, the family's obsession with control, with maintaining their empire at any cost. The women who'd disappeared from his life over the years, relationships that had ended mysteriously or tragically. "Alexander?" Isabella's voice sounded far away. He looked at his wife, then at Claire, at his daughter, and felt something break open inside him. Grief for Tracy. Rage at his father. Terror for what might still be coming. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And then we need to call the police back." Because I think I know who's behind this, and it's so much worse than we imagined. Claire sat up in bed, her gray eyes meeting his. In that moment, father and daughter recognized each other, bound by blood and tragedy, and a gift that had just saved them all from unspeakable loss. The mansion settled into evening shadows, its beautiful facade hiding the rot within. And somewhere in the city, Harold Izzy received a phone call telling him the plan had failed, that his son's wife still lived, that everything was about to unravel. The game had changed. Claire had seen to that. I need to continue to reach the 2,000-word target for Section 1. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The beauty felt wrong somehow, inappropriate for the darkness that had been revealed. Alexander sat on the edge of Claire's bed, his hands shaking as he tried to find the right words. I knew your mother, he finally said. I loved her very much. Claire's eyes widened. She'd seen photos of her father once, hidden in her mother's things before they'd lost everything to medical bills. The man in those pictures had been younger, happier, but the eyes were the same, ocean blue, full of storms. You're him, she whispered. You're my daddy. The word broke something in Alexander. He'd never heard it before, never expected to. Isabella moved closer, her own eyes filling with tears as she understood. This wasn't just a child they'd rescued. This was Alexander's daughter, her husband's child, a piece of him that had been lost and suffering while they lived in luxury. I didn't know, Alexander said, his voice cracking. I swear to you, Claire, I didn't know. If I had known. Mama said you didn't. She said your father kept you apart. She wasn't mad at you. She told me to find you if anything happened to her. Claire's small hand reached out, touching his face with wonder. She said you were a good man who got trapped by bad people. Tracy had understood, even at the end. Even dying, she'd protected him in her daughter's eyes. The generosity of it, the grace, made Alexander want to scream. He'd abandoned her, left her pregnant and alone, and she'd still loved him enough to make sure their daughter didn't hate him. There's more, Claire said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Mama left me a letter, for when I got older. But I read it after she died because I was scared and alone. She reached into her worn jacket pocket and pulled out a folded paper, creased and stained but carefully preserved. She said there were things you needed to know. About your father. About why people around you kept disappearing. Alexander took the letter with trembling hands. Tracy's handwriting, familiar and beloved, covered the page. As he read, the truth unfolded like a nightmare made real. Harold Izzy hadn't just separated them. He'd systematically destroyed every relationship Alexander had ever tried to build outside the family's control. The fiancé who'd died in a car accident, not an accident. The business partner who'd committed suicide, murdered. Woman after woman, friend after friend. Anyone who might have pulled Alexander away from the family empire or produced heirs that Harold couldn't control. And Tracy, brilliant Tracy, had figured it out. She'd kept evidence, recorded conversations, collected proof. The letter mentioned a safety deposit box, a key hidden in the lining of Claire's stuffed rabbit. The one possession she'd managed to keep through everything. Where's your rabbit? Alexander asked urgently. At the shelter. They keep our things there during the day. Claire's voice was small. Mr. Buttons. That's his name. Mama gave him to me when I was born. Alexander was already on his phone, calling his head of security. The rabbit needed to be retrieved tonight, immediately. Because if Tracy's evidence was as damning as the letter suggested, and if Harold discovered that Claire had survived, had connected with Alexander, had saved Isabella. The tingling in Claire's fingertips intensified. She grabbed Alexander's arm. Something's wrong. Someone's coming. Someone bad. Isabella moved to the window, pulling back the curtain. Black cars were pulling up the drive, multiple vehicles moving fast. Alexander, we have company. He recognized the lead car. His father's. And behind it, his brother Kevin's Range Rover. They'd come together, which meant they knew. Somehow, they already knew that Claire had survived, that the connection had been made. Call 911, Alexander commanded Isabella. Tell them we have an intruder situation, potential threat to life. Then take Claire to the panic room. But Claire shook her head, her gray eyes suddenly ancient and knowing. No. If we hide, more people die. I can help. I can see things. I can tell the police what they need to know. She was 7 years old and had already lost everything. She'd lived on streets that would have broken grown adults. She'd saved a stranger's life with nothing but instinct and courage. And now, looking at her father for the first time, she was ready to face the monsters that had destroyed her family. Alexander looked at his daughter, truly saw her, and understood. Claire wasn't just a victim. She was a survivor. And her gift, the curse she'd inherited from some unknown place, might be the only thing that could end his father's reign of terror. "Okay," he said, pulling both Claire and Isabella close. "We do this together. All of us. But we're smart about it. We record everything. We protect each other. And we end this tonight." The doorbell rang, its cheerful chime grotesque against the tension. Harold Izzy had come to clean up his mess. He just didn't know that his mess had grown teeth. The doorbell's echo faded into silence that pressed against the walls like a living thing. Alexander moved toward the stairs, his mind calculating angles and exits, while Isabella kept Claire close. The child's fingers had gone ice cold, her breathing shallow as the gift worked through her, showing her fragments of what was coming. "He has a gun," Claire whispered. "Not your father. The other man. Kevin. He's planning to use it if you don't cooperate." Alexander's blood froze. His brother, always the enforcer, always willing to do what Harold deemed necessary. He should have seen this coming years ago, should have questioned the convenient accidents and tragic coincidences that had cleared obstacles from the family's path. But he'd been comfortable, complicit in his ignorance, wrapped in wealth that had been purchased with blood. The front door opened before Alexander reached it. Harold Izzy didn't wait for invitations, not in homes he considered extensions of his empire. At 73, he remained imposing, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, moving with the confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences. Kevin followed, younger, hungrier, his hand resting too casually near his jacket pocket. "Son," Harold said, his voice warm with false affection. "We heard about the incident at the party. Terrible business. We came to make sure Isabella and the baby are safe." "How did you hear?" Alexander asked, positioning himself between his father and the stairs. "The police haven't released any information yet." Harold's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I have connections throughout the city. When my family is threatened, I make it my business to know." His gaze drifted past Alexander, searching. "I also heard you brought home a street child. Admirable charity, but perhaps not the wisest choice given today's security breach." "Her name is Claire," Alexander said quietly. "And she's not charity. She's my daughter." The words landed like grenades. Harold's expression flickered. Surprise, calculation, rage, all cycling through in seconds before settling back into careful neutrality. Kevin's hand moved closer to his pocket. "Impossible," Harold said. "You have no children outside your marriage. Tracy K.I.'s. 8 years ago. You forced me to leave her." Alexander's voice hardened with each word. "You intercepted her calls, her letters. You made sure I never knew she was pregnant. And when she got sick, when she needed help, you let her die in poverty while your granddaughter lived on the streets." Harold's jaw tightened. Tracy K.I.'s was a distraction. A waitress with delusions of belonging in our world. "I saved you from a disastrous mistake." "You murdered her," Alexander said flatly. "Maybe not directly, but you destroyed her life, took away every resource she might have used to survive. That's murder, father. And it's not the first time." Kevin moved then, his hand sliding into his jacket, but Isabella's voice cut through the tension from the top of the stairs. "I wouldn't do that, Kevin. The police are already on their way, and every word you've spoken since entering this house has been recorded." She held up her phone, its screen glowing with an active recording app. "Smile for the camera." The silence that followed was absolute. Harold's mask finally slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. This wasn't a man capable of love or remorse. This was a predator who'd spent decades eliminating threats, and now his prey had cornered him. "You self-righteous fool," Harold said to Alexander, his voice dropping its pretense of warmth. "Do you have any idea what I've built? What I've protected? The Izzy Empire spans 6 continents, employs 50,000 people, shapes governments and economies. And you want to destroy it over some waitress and her bastard child." "Over murder," Alexander corrected. "Multiple murders." "How many, father? How many people have you killed to maintain control?" Harold laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Control isn't maintained through weakness, son. It's maintained through decisive action. That business partner who would have stolen our patents? Gone. That senator who wanted to investigate our offshore accounts? Heart attack. That beautiful young woman you were going to propose to in college. What was her name? Amanda? The car accident was regrettable but necessary. Isabella gasped. Alexander's knees nearly buckled. Amanda Chun, brilliant and kind, dead at 23. He'd mourned her for years, never questioning the drunk driver's story, never imagining. "You're insane," Alexander whispered. "I'm practical," Harold corrected. "And I'm thorough." Which is why, he turned toward the stairs, his voice rising. "Claire, dear child, come down here. Let's discuss this like a family." Claire appeared at the top of the stairs, her small frame trembling but her gray eyes steady. She clutched Mr. Buttons, the stuffed rabbit that held the key to her mother's evidence. "I know what you did," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "I know about the poison you put in Mama's cancer medicine. How you made her sicker instead of better. How you watched her die slow when you could have let her live." The confession hung in the air. Harold didn't deny it. Instead, he smiled, a terrible, empty expression. "Your mother was clever. Too clever. She'd figured out too much, collected too much evidence. The cancer was convenient, but she was fighting it too well. A few adjustments to her treatment, and nature took its course." Alexander launched himself at his father, rage overriding reason, but Kevin was faster. The gun appeared, leveled at Alexander's chest, stopping him mid-stride. "Nobody moves," Kevin said, his voice steady. "Nobody does anything stupid. We're going to walk out of here, and you're going to forget everything you think you know. Because if you don't, Isabella and that baby she's carrying won't see morning. Neither will the street rat." Claire's fingers tingled violently. The gift surged through her, sharper than ever before, showing her threads of the immediate future. She saw the gun, saw Kevin's finger tightening on the trigger, saw the window behind the bookshelf where a police officer was already positioning himself after Isabella's earlier 911 call. "There's a cop behind you," Claire said suddenly. "Coming through the window by the bookshelf. He'll be inside in 5 seconds. Kevin spun, instinct overriding training, and in that moment of distraction, Alexander moved. He tackled his brother, sending them both crashing into Harold. The gun discharged, its report deafening in the enclosed space, the bullet burying itself in the ceiling. The window shattered. 2 officers burst through, weapons drawn, shouting commands. More police flooded through the front door. They'd been staging outside, waiting for the right moment. Isabella had called them 20 minutes earlier, when she'd first spotted Harold's car approaching, and they'd surrounded the house silently. Harold Izzy, architect of deaths and destroyer of lives, found himself on his knees with a gun pressed to his head for the first time in his existence. The shock on his face was almost comical. Men like him didn't get caught. Men like him always won. Except this time, a 7-year-old girl with a gift had changed the rules. Kevin struggled as officers cuffed him, still trying to reach his gun. "You don't understand," he shouted at Alexander. "Everything we did was to protect the family. To keep us strong. You're too weak to see that sometimes sacrifice is necessary." "The only thing you sacrificed was your humanity," Alexander said, his voice breaking. "And you did it for money. For power. For nothing that actually matters." As police led Harold and Kevin out, detectives began processing the scene. The recording on Isabella's phone was secured as evidence. Claire's testimony was taken gently, with a child psychologist present. And through it all, the little girl remained calm, answering questions with a clarity that astonished the investigators. She described the poison on the smoothie glass, identified the crystalline residue as the same substance she'd seen in her mother's medicine bottles during the final weeks. She explained her gift without embarrassment, how she'd known about the police officer at the window, how she could sense danger before it manifested, how she'd saved Isabella by trusting what her instincts screamed. The detective handling the case, a woman named Martinez with kind eyes and gray streaks in her dark hair, listened with growing amazement. "This child's abilities," she said to Alexander, "combined with the evidence her mother collected, we might be able to close dozens of cold cases. Disappearances, accidents that were never quite right. Your father kept meticulous records, didn't he?" "Obsessively," Alexander confirmed. He held Mr. Buttons, having removed the key from its hidden pocket. "And my mother, Tracy, she documented everything she discovered. There's a safety deposit box. Once we open it, we'll need it for evidence," Martinez said gently. "But yes, let's retrieve it. Tomorrow, with proper legal authorization. Tonight, you all need rest. This family needs to begin healing." But Claire shook her head. "There's more," she said, her voice tired but insistent. "Your father didn't work alone. He mentioned an organization. There are others. Safe houses. Children. Her gray eyes filled with tears. I can feel them. Lost children like I was lost. They're scared and alone and nobody's looking for them the right way. Martinez knelt beside her. Can you tell me more about what you feel? Claire closed her eyes, her small hands gripping Mr. Button's. The gift that had seemed like a curse suddenly revealed its purpose. She could sense them, threads of fear and loneliness radiating across the city, across multiple cities, a network of hidden suffering. They move them, she whispered. Every few weeks. Different houses, different cities. But there's patterns. Numbers. The houses have numbers that don't match the streets. Like codes. Her eyes snapped open. I can remember them. All of them. The numbers I saw on buildings when I was on the streets. The ones that felt wrong. Alexander and Isabella exchanged glances. Their daughter, and she was their daughter now, biology and love combined, wasn't just a survivor. She was a key to something vast and terrible, a network that Harold had been part of, that stretched beyond anything they'd imagined. We're going to need FBI involvement, Martinez said, already pulling out her phone. Child trafficking, organized crime, potential international connections. This is bigger than anyone thought. As the detective made calls, Isabella sat beside Claire on the couch, pulling the exhausted child close. You've been so brave, she murmured. Braver than anyone should have to be. But you don't have to carry this alone anymore. We're here. We're your family now. Claire leaned into her warmth, clutching Mr. Button's. Mama told me that gifts are only curses if we use them wrong. She said if I ever found a way to help people, the hurt would matter less. A tear slid down her cheek. I miss her so much. I know, sweetheart. And I'm so sorry. Isabella kissed the top of her head, her own tears falling. But she was right. You're going to help so many people. You already have. Alexander watched his wife comfort his daughter, watched these two survivors finding strength in each other, and felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of family. Blood mattered, yes. But choice mattered more. Love mattered more. And right now, in this moment of wreckage and revelation, they were choosing each other. The safety deposit box was retrieved the next morning under heavy police escort. Inside, Tracy's evidence painted a portrait of systematic evil. Recordings, photographs, financial documents linking Harold Izzy to murders, extortion, and a trafficking network that spanned 3 countries. She'd been investigating for years, building a case she'd never had the chance to present, protecting it all for the daughter she knew would one day need it. Her final letter to Claire, found among the documents, explained everything. How she'd loved Alexander, how she'd understood he was trapped, how she'd never blamed him. How she'd fought her cancer with everything she had, not realizing until too late that her treatment was poisoned. How her final gift to Claire was the truth, carefully preserved, waiting for the right moment. Tell your father I never stopped loving him, the letter concluded. And tell him that our daughter is the best thing either of us ever created. She's special, Claire. Not broken, not cursed. Special. Her gift will save lives. It already saved mine in 1,000 small ways. Let it save others too. Let it matter. Alexander read the letter in the privacy of his study, his tears falling on Tracy's careful handwriting. He'd loved this woman, lost her through cowardice and manipulation, and now discovered she'd loved him through it all. The waste of it, the tragic, senseless waste, nearly destroyed him. But Claire was alive. Isabella was alive. Their baby, a sibling Claire was already excited about, was safe. And from the ashes of Harold's empire, something better could rise. The FBI investigation, guided by Claire's remarkable memory and intuitive sense of patterns, uncovered 12 safe houses across 6 states. 23 children were recovered in coordinated raids, each one a thread in the network Harold had helped maintain. The oldest was 16, the youngest just 4. All of them lost, frightened, trapped in systems designed to erase their identities. Claire met some of them during the recovery process, her presence somehow calming them in ways traditional therapy couldn't match. She understood. She'd been lost too. She'd survived by listening to the gift, and now she was teaching them to listen to their own instincts, their own inner voices that screamed for home. You're not alone, she told a girl her own age, holding her hand during an FBI interview. I know it feels like nobody's coming, like nobody cares. But they are. They do. And it gets better. I promise it gets better. Martinez watched Claire work, watched her transform trauma into purpose, and felt her own faith in humanity restore itself. She's going to change the world, she told Alexander. I've been doing this job 20 years. and I've never seen anything like her. Alexander nodded, pride and grief mixing in his chest. Her mother knew. Tracy always saw the best in people, always believed good could come from suffering. He paused. I want to honor that. Isabella and I have been discussing it. We want to start a foundation. The Tracy K.I.'s Family Justice Foundation. To help separated families, to fund reunification services, to support survivors of trafficking. Tracy would have loved that, Martinez said softly. And Claire will be its heart. The interrogation room felt smaller than its actual dimensions, walls pressing inward as Harold Izzy sat across from federal prosecutors. He'd aged a decade in the 3 days since his arrest, expensive suit rumpled, silver hair disheveled, the veneer of untouchable power finally cracked. But his eyes remained sharp, calculating even in defeat. I want immunity, he said, his lawyer silent beside him. Full immunity for testimony against the organization. Assistant Attorney General Rebecca Chin, no relation to Amanda, though the coincidence wasn't lost on anyone, leaned back in her chair. You murdered at least 14 people that we can prove. You poisoned a cancer patient. You orchestrated an attempt on a pregnant woman's life. And you want immunity. Harold's smile was thin, reptilian. I have information about networks spanning 23 countries. Names of politicians, judges, law enforcement officials on the payroll. Financial structures hiding billions in trafficking revenue. Locations of facilities you haven't even imagined. He leaned forward. Without me, you get a few safe houses and low-level operators. With me, you dismantle an empire. We have your son, Chin countered. Kevin's already talking. Kevin knows logistics. I know architecture. Harold's confidence hadn't entirely disappeared. I helped build this system. I know where the bodies are buried, literally and figuratively. I know which senators vacation at private islands, which federal agents take payments to look the other way, which charitable organizations are fronts for moving merchandise. The word merchandise applied to children made Chen's stomach turn. But she kept her expression neutral. Tell me about Tracy K.I.'s. Why did you kill her? Harold's jaw tightened. She wasn't supposed to be intelligent. Alexander had a pattern, beautiful, vapid women who looked good at charity galas. Tracy was different. She asked questions. She noticed things. When Alexander broke it off, she didn't disappear quietly. She kept digging. Into your business? Into everything. She got a job at a medical records company, accessed files on Alexander's previous girlfriends. She noticed the pattern, women who got too close, who got pregnant or engaged, who became liabilities. They had accidents, illnesses, tragedies. Harold's voice carried a note of grudging respect. Tracy was smart enough to document it all without being obvious. By the time I realized what she'd collected, she'd already hidden it. So you poisoned her cancer treatment. I expedited a natural process. Harold's voice remained clinical, detached. The cancer would have killed her eventually. I simply ensured it happened before she could use what she knew. Before Claire was old enough to understand her mother's warnings. Chen felt bow rise in her throat. Claire was 5 years old when Tracy died. You let that child watch her mother suffer, knowing you were causing it. Children are resilient, Harold said dismissively. And Claire was always going to be a problem. That gift of hers, whatever it is, abnormal perception, pattern recognition, some kind of sensory integration we don't understand. Tracy claimed Claire could sense danger, predict events. Useful in some contexts, dangerous in others. So you tried to kill Alexander's wife, Chin said. Your grandchild. Why? Harold's expression darkened. Isabella was pregnant with a legitimate heir. One I couldn't control. Alexander was already pulling away from the family business, becoming soft, ethical. The word dripped with contempt. The baby would have given him an excuse to break completely. And then Claire appeared, saving Isabella, connecting with Alexander. 2 heirs, both outside my influence. Unacceptable. You would have murdered your own grandchildren to maintain control. I would have done what was necessary to preserve what I built. Harold's voice rose slightly, the first crack in his composure. You people don't understand legacy. You think morality matters more than power, that individual lives outweigh institutional strength. But empires aren't built on kindness. They're built on hard choices, on sacrificing the few for the benefit of the many. The many being you and people like you, Chin observed. The children in those safe houses weren't benefiting from your empire. Harold waved dismissively. The organization needed revenue streams. Trafficking is profitable, low risk when done correctly. I didn't create the demand. I simply met existing market needs. The casual evil of it, the complete absence of empathy, reminded Chun why she dedicated her life to prosecution. Men like Harold didn't see other humans as real. They saw resources, obstacles, assets to be managed or eliminated. Tell me about the network, she said, changing tactics. Who runs it now that you're arrested? It's decentralized by design. Regional operators report to continental supervisors. I was North American coordinator, but there are others, Europe, Asia, South America. We meet quarterly, virtually now, though we used to rotate locations. Private islands, luxury resorts, places where privacy is guaranteed. Names. Harold smiled. That's where immunity negotiations begin. But I'll give you one as good faith. He leaned forward conspiratorially. Senator Richard Dalton. He chairs the Appropriations Committee, controls federal funding for trafficking investigations. He's been on the payroll for 8 years, ensuring investigations die before they threaten the network. Chen's blood ran cold. Dalton was a decorated lawmaker, champion of children's rights legislation, frequently quoted advocate for family values. The hypocrisy was staggering. How do we know you're telling the truth? Check his finances. His son's private school tuition is $40,000 annually. His salary is $174,000. His wife doesn't work. He owns 3 properties. Do the math. Harold sat back, satisfied. That's what I offer. Dozens of names like that, complete documentation, locations of evidence caches. But only with full immunity. Chin stood, gathering her files. I'll present your offer to my superiors. But Harold, she paused at the door. Even if they grant immunity for testimony, you'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. The people you're betraying? They don't forgive. They don't forget. And they have very long reach. For the first time, genuine fear flickered across Harold's face. Meanwhile, at the Izzy mansion, Claire sat in the newly established foundation office, surrounded by maps and case files. FBI agents had been amazed by her ability to recall details from her time on the streets. Buildings with unusual numbering, vehicles that appeared in multiple locations, faces she'd seen repeatedly in different contexts. This house, she said, pointing to a photograph. I saw this one. The numbers on the door were painted over, but I could see where they used to be. 2847. But the street only goes up to 2600. Agent Mitchell marked the location. That's consistent with the pattern. They use non-sequential numbering to confuse delivery services and create plausible deniability. If anyone asks, it's just a quirky address. Claire closed her eyes, letting the gift work. Images flooded her mind, fragmented, chaotic, but meaningful. There's more there. Underground. I can feel it. Cold spaces. Crying. Her eyes snapped open. They keep children underground. Sound doesn't carry. Nobody hears. Mitchell immediately radioed for a tactical team. Within hours, agents descended on the location, a seemingly ordinary suburban home in a quiet neighborhood. The raid uncovered 7 children in a renovated basement, soundproofed walls hiding their presence from unsuspecting neighbors. Each rescue felt like vindication to Claire, proof that her gift mattered, that the suffering she'd endured had purpose. But it also exhausted her. The emotional weight of sensing so much pain, so much fear, took its toll on a 7-year-old psyche. Isabella found her one evening, curled in the window seat of her new bedroom, tears streaming silently. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" "I can feel them," Claire whispered. "All the ones we haven't found yet. They're scared. They don't understand why nobody's coming. And I know where some of them are, but the grown-ups are moving too slow. By the time we get there, they'll be moved again." Isabella pulled her close. "The FBI is doing everything they can. You've already helped save so many children. But not all of them. Not enough of them." Claire's voice broke. "Mama died trying to stop these people. I should be able to do more. I should be able to save everyone." "Oh, Claire." Isabella's heart ached. "You're 7 years old. You shouldn't have to carry this burden at all. What you've done is extraordinary, but you can't save the whole world by yourself." "Then what's the point of this gift?" Claire demanded, frustration and grief spilling over. "What's the point of knowing terrible things if I can't fix them? If I can't bring back the kids who are already gone or save the ones still trapped?" Alexander appeared in the doorway, having heard his daughter's anguish. He crossed the room and knelt beside them. "The point," he said gently, "is that you're giving hope to families who had none. Every child you help us find, every location you identify, that's a life changed forever. You're not responsible for fixing everything Tracy documented, everything my father destroyed. You're responsible for being 7 years old, for healing, for letting us help you. But Your mama wanted you to be happy, Alexander interrupted softly. She wanted you safe and loved. Yes, she left evidence because she believed in justice. But she didn't leave it for you to carry alone. She left it for all of us, the FBI, the prosecutors, everyone working to dismantle what Harold built. Your part is to be a child. To go to school, make friends, laugh without guilt. The foundation we're building in Tracy's name will continue the work. You don't have to do it all yourself. Claire looked between her father and Isabella, these people who'd become her family so quickly, who'd taken her from the streets and given her not just shelter but belonging. I don't know how to just be a kid, she admitted. I don't remember how. Then we'll figure it out together, Isabella promised. We'll get you into a good school, find activities you enjoy, introduce you to children your age. And yes, when the FBI needs your help, when you feel ready to share what your gift shows you, we'll support that too. But it won't be your whole life. It can't be. Over the following weeks, a delicate balance emerged. Claire attended therapy sessions with Dr. Sarah Chun. Another Chun, the universe apparently determined to connect the family to that name. She enrolled in a small private school where her unusual background was kept confidential. She learned to play soccer, discovered a love for painting, made a friend named Maya who didn't know anything about gifts or trafficking or tragedy. But she also continued working with the FBI when patterns emerged that only she could identify. Her gift wasn't something that could be turned off or ignored, but it could be managed, integrated into a life that contained joy alongside purpose. The investigation into Harold's network expanded exponentially. Senator Dalton was arrested in a dawn raid, his shock denials crumbling when agents presented documentation of offshore accounts and encrypted communications. 3 federal judges were implicated. 2 state governors resigned ahead of indictments. The scope of the corruption was breathtaking. Kevin Izzy, lacking his father's strategic mind, had already broken under interrogation. He provided details about operational procedures, financial flows, the hierarchy of regional operators. His testimony, combined with Harold's information for immunity deal, created a roadmap for dismantling the entire network. But the emotional cost was devastating. Alexander learned that his father had orchestrated not just Amanda's death, but the deaths of 4 other women he'd cared about over the years. Each relationship that had ended tragically or mysteriously, Harold's hand had guided them all toward destruction. He couldn't let me love anyone, Alexander said one night, sitting in his study with Isabella and Claire. Anyone who might have given me children, family outside his control, had to be eliminated. I've spent my whole life surrounded by ghosts I didn't even know I was mourning. Claire moved to his side, her small hand finding his. But you have us now, and we're not going anywhere. Right, Isabella? Right, Isabella confirmed, her hand resting on her growing belly. This baby will know their big sister, will grow up in a family built on love, not control. Harold's legacy ends with us. What we build next is entirely different. The foundation officially launched 3 months after Harold's arrest. The Tracy K.I.'s Family Justice Foundation partnered with the FBI, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and international organizations dedicated to combating trafficking. Claire became its youngest consultant, her insights revolutionizing how investigators approached pattern recognition in trafficking cases. But more importantly, the foundation funded reunification services, therapy for survivors, legal assistance for families navigating the complex systems of recovery. Tracy's dream, that suffering could be transformed into purpose, took tangible form. Harold Izzy, true to form, provided testimony that led to over 200 arrests across 15 countries. His immunity deal protected him from prosecution, but it couldn't protect him from the hatred of those he'd betrayed. 6 months into protective custody, he was found dead in his cell, an apparent suicide though many suspected retribution had found him even in isolation. Alexander felt nothing when he received the news. No grief, no relief, just a hollow acknowledgement that his father's story had ended as it had been lived, violently, without redemption. He didn't attend the funeral. Neither did Kevin, who was serving consecutive life sentences in a maximum security facility. The Izzy empire, built on blood and maintained through terror, was systematically dismantled. Assets were liquidated, proceeds directed to victim compensation funds. The family name, once synonymous with power, became associated with justice instead. And through it all, Claire grew. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, learning that her gift was only part of who she was. She was also a big sister to baby Marcus, born healthy and perfect 6 months after her reunion with Alexander. She was a friend, a student, a daughter. She was 7 years old, then 8, then 9, each year adding layers of normalcy to the extraordinary foundation of her life. The courtroom gallery was packed on the day the final verdicts were read. Families of victims filled the rows, their faces etched with years of searching, hoping, grieving. Claire sat between Alexander and Isabella, baby Marcus sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms. At 10 years old now, Claire had grown taller, her gray eyes still carrying that ancient wisdom but softened by 3 years of safety and love. Judge Patricia Holloway surveyed the room before speaking. In the matter of the United States versus Kevin, Izzy, and 47 co-defendants, this court has reviewed testimony, evidence, and impact statements over the past 18 months. The crimes committed, human trafficking, murder, conspiracy, corruption, represent a systematic assault on the most vulnerable members of our society. Claire's fingers twitched slightly. The gift was quieter these days, less overwhelming, but it never fully disappeared. Right now it told her that justice was coming, that the weight so many families had carried was about to shift. Kevin, Izzy, you are sentenced to 7 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. The judge's voice was steel. Your actions directly resulted in the suffering of over 100 children, the deaths of 14 people, and incalculable trauma to countless families. You will spend the remainder of your natural life in federal custody. Kevin stood emotionless, his expensive suit unable to disguise the defeat in his posture. He'd aged dramatically during the trial, the reality of consequences finally penetrating his entitled worldview. As marshals led him away, his eyes briefly met Alexander's. Whatever silent communication passed between the brothers, it held no warmth, no familial connection. Just acknowledgement that the family they'd been born into had died. The other verdicts followed: regional operators, corrupt officials, facilitators who'd enabled the network's operations. Each sentence brought quiet sobs of relief from families in the gallery, validation that their suffering had been witnessed, that justice, though delayed, had arrived. When the session concluded, Claire was approached by a woman she recognized from case files, Maria Santos, whose daughter Elena had been missing for 4 years before Claire's memory had helped locate a safe house in Nevada. Elena, now 13, stood beside her mother, holding her hand tightly. "I wanted to thank you," Maria said, tears streaming. "You brought my baby back to me. I'd given up hope, thought I'd never see her again. But you remembered the house. You remembered the details nobody else noticed." Claire smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I'm glad Elena's home. That's all that matters." Elena stepped forward, shy but determined. "My therapist said I should tell people who helped me what it meant. So thank you. For caring about kids like me. For using your gift even when it was hard." The 2 girls embraced, survivors recognizing each other across the distance of their different experiences. Around them, other reunions played out, families made whole, children who'd aged out of photos finally matching the images their parents had carried for years, siblings meeting again after separations that had seemed permanent. Agent Mitchell approached Alexander, her expression one of professional satisfaction mixed with personal relief. "We've closed 83 missing children cases directly attributable to Claire's assistance. Another 147 through the broader investigation her initial testimony enabled. The Foundation's work has revolutionized how we approach pattern recognition in trafficking cases." "Claire revolutionized it," Alexander corrected. "We just gave her the platform and support." "She's remarkable," Mitchell agreed. "But so are you and Isabella. Not every parent could have handled discovering a child under these circumstances, could have integrated her into your family while supporting her through trauma and helping her develop her abilities constructively. You've given her something Harold never understood, the freedom to be both special and normal." Isabella adjusted Marcus in her arms, the toddler stirring sleepily. "She's taught us as much as we've taught her. About resilience, about purpose, about transforming pain into something meaningful. Tracy raised an extraordinary daughter. We're just privileged to continue what she started." The foundation had grown beyond anything they'd initially imagined. What began as a family tribute to Tracy had expanded into an international organization with offices in 12 countries. The Tracy K.I.'s Family Justice Foundation partnered with law enforcement, social services, and survivor advocacy groups to revolutionize reunification services. Claire's insights had led to the development of new investigative techniques. Her ability to recognize patterns, remember seemingly insignificant details, and sense connections others missed had been studied by forensic psychologists and criminal profilers. While they couldn't fully explain her gift, some combination of eidetic memory, enhanced sensory processing, and intuitive pattern recognition, they could document its effectiveness. But the Foundation's work extended far beyond Claire's abilities. It funded therapy for survivors, providing specialized treatment for the complex trauma trafficking victims experienced. It offered legal assistance to families navigating the bureaucratic maze of reunification. It trained law enforcement in trauma-informed investigative techniques. And perhaps most importantly, it created spaces where survivors could heal, connect, and reclaim their lives. One such space was the Tracy K.I.'s Recovery Center, a residential facility on the outskirts of the city. Claire visited regularly, not as a consultant, but as a peer. She ran art therapy sessions for younger children, teaching them that creativity could be a language when words failed. She organized game nights and movie screenings, creating moments of normalcy and joy. She simply existed among other survivors, proof that healing was possible, that life after trauma could contain laughter. "You're different from the therapists," a 14-year-old named Jake told her during one visit. He'd been recovered from a trafficking ring 2 years earlier, still struggling with nightmares and trust issues. "You get it. You don't just know about it from books. You lived it." Claire nodded, mixing paints for their current art project. "I was homeless for 6 months after my mom died. I know what it's like to be invisible, to have people look through you like you don't matter. But we do matter, Jake. Every single one of us matters." "The nightmares don't stop," he said quietly. "Everyone tells me they will, but they don't. They change," Claire said honestly. "They become less frequent, less intense. And you learn to ground yourself when they come. To remind yourself that you survived, that you're safe now." She met his eyes. "It's okay if healing isn't linear. It's okay if some days are harder than others. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're human." These conversations, repeated with different survivors in different contexts, represented the heart of the Foundation's mission. Not just rescue, but recovery. Not just reunification, but rebuilding. The work required patience, resources, and unwavering commitment to seeing each person as an individual, not a statistic. The Foundation's international expansion began when Claire was 9. During a family vacation to London, she'd experienced one of her intuitive flashes while walking through a shopping district. The gift showed her a building, children's faces, a pattern of movement that felt wrong. After reporting it to local authorities, a trafficking ring operating across Western Europe was uncovered, leading to 32 recoveries. The incident demonstrated that trafficking wasn't just an American problem. It was a global crisis requiring coordinated international response. Alexander and Isabella, leveraging their business connections and Tracy's documented research, began building partnerships with organizations worldwide. The Foundation opened offices in London, Berlin, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, and Manila. Each location adapted the core mission to local contexts, partnering with regional law enforcement and social services. Claire's techniques for pattern recognition were taught to investigators globally, democratizing the approach so it didn't depend solely on her unique abilities. By the time Claire turned 10, the Foundation had facilitated over 500 family reunifications, provided services to thousands of trafficking survivors, and contributed to the dismantling of 17 international trafficking networks. The scope of impact would have seemed impossible 3 years earlier when a homeless child had saved a pregnant woman's life at a garden party. But perhaps the most profound impact was on the survivors themselves. The Foundation created a network of people who understood, who'd survived similar horrors, who could support each other in ways outsiders never could. Support groups met regularly, some in person, others virtual, creating communities of healing. Claire attended a teen survivors group monthly, even though she was younger than most participants. "You've helped us so much," the group facilitator, Sarah Chun, the therapist who'd become family friend, told her. "But it's important you receive support too, that you have spaces where you're not the helper but the person being helped." In those sessions, Claire talked about missing her mother, about the guilt she sometimes felt for having a good life when Tracy had suffered. She discussed the pressure of her gift, the exhaustion of constantly sensing danger and pain. She admitted that sometimes she wanted to be ordinary, to not carry the weight of knowing. "But then I remember the kids we've found," she said during one session. "The families brought back together. And I think maybe the gift isn't a curse or even just a responsibility. Maybe it's what Mama always said, a way to transform suffering into something that matters. I survived for a reason. We all survived for a reason." Marcus's second birthday party was held at the Foundation's headquarters, a celebration that mixed family intimacy with organizational pride. Children from the recovery center attended, along with staff, volunteers, and several families the Foundation had helped reunite. The joyful chaos of cake and presents and laughter represented everything the Foundation stood for. Life continuing, healing happening, futures being reclaimed. Alexander watched his daughter help Marcus open presents, her patience and gentleness with her little brother a testament to her character. She'd been given every reason to become bitter, closed off, damaged beyond repair. Instead, she'd chosen compassion. She'd chosen to use her pain as a bridge to others' suffering, to transform trauma into purpose. "Tracy would be so proud," Isabella murmured, appearing at his side. "Not just of Claire, but of everything we've built in her memory." "I think about her every day," Alexander admitted. "Wonder what she'd say about all this, how she'd guide Claire through the challenges we're still figuring out. I wish she was here to see it." "She is here," Isabella said softly. "In Claire's strength, in the Foundation's mission, in every family that gets reunited. Tracy's legacy isn't just about what she documented or what she discovered. It's about the love she gave Claire, the values she instilled, the hope she maintained even when dying. That's what we're honoring." The Foundation's work continued expanding. By Claire's 12th birthday, they'd established a scholarship program for trafficking survivors pursuing education. They'd created job training initiatives, helping survivors develop skills and economic independence. They'd launched a legislative advocacy arm, pushing for stronger trafficking laws and better support services. Claire, now a thoughtful preteen, balanced foundation work with increasingly normal activities. She excelled academically, played on a soccer team, took piano lessons, maintained friendships with kids who knew nothing about her past. The gift remained part of her life, but it no longer defined her entirely. "I've been thinking about college," she told Alexander one evening. They'd established a tradition of weekly dinners, just the two of them, time to talk about anything and everything. "I want to study psychology and criminal justice. Maybe become an FBI profiler or a therapist specializing in trauma recovery." "You'd be excellent at either," Alexander said. "But that's still 6 years away. Don't rush yourself into decisions about the future when you're 12. "I know, but I want to be prepared. I want to make sure the gift becomes something professional, not just something weird about me. If I have formal training, people will take it more seriously." Alexander recognized his own driven nature in his daughter, the need to transform circumstances into achievement. "Just remember that you're allowed to change your mind. Allowed to pursue paths that have nothing to do with trafficking or the Foundation. You could become an artist, a teacher, an astronaut. Your life doesn't have to be defined by what happened to you or what you survived." Claire smiled. "I know, Dad, but helping people feels right. It feels like honoring Mama, like making sure what she went through mattered. I'm not saying I'll do Foundation work forever, but right now it's where I'm supposed to be." The conversation reflected Claire's maturity, her ability to hold complexity, gratitude for her current life while honoring her past, commitment to purpose while maintaining space for growth. She was becoming not just a survivor but a whole person, integrating all aspects of her identity into something uniquely herself. The Foundation's 10th anniversary celebration was scheduled for the following year, a milestone that seemed both distant and impossibly close. Plans were already underway for a gala fundraiser, survivor testimonial events, and the publication of a book documenting the Foundation's first decade. A book Claire had agreed to write the foreword for, sharing her journey from homeless child to Foundation consultant to simply Claire, a girl with a gift who'd chosen to use it for good. As the years accumulated, rescues, reunifications, healing journeys documented and celebrated, the Foundation became more than an organization. It became a movement, proof that trauma didn't have to be the end of the story, that survivors could reclaim their narratives and transform suffering into purpose. Claire's gift, once a lonely burden carried by a frightened child on the streets, had become a tool for global change. But more importantly, Claire herself had become whole, daughter, sister, friend, survivor, advocate, and simply a young person discovering who she wanted to be. The Foundation's motto, chosen by Claire and inscribed above the headquarters entrance, captured everything they'd learned. From darkness, light. From suffering, strength. From separation, reunion. Every lost child matters. And in living rooms and therapy sessions and reunification meetings across the world, families brought back together repeated the truth that had started it all. A little girl with gray eyes and an impossible gift had changed everything by refusing to stay silent, by trusting her instincts, by believing that even the smallest voice could matter. Tracy K.I.'s legacy, preserved in evidence and embodied in her daughter, had transformed from documentation of evil into proof that love, even from beyond death, could still save lives. The Foundation would continue growing, adapting, serving, long after this chapter of Claire's story concluded. Because the work of healing was never finished, but it could always matter. Moral lesson: life's greatest challenges often reveal our greatest purposes. Claire discovered that her gift, what she once saw as a curse, became the bridge between suffering and healing. Tracy taught her daughter that pain transformed through purpose loses its power to destroy us. We learn that family isn't just blood but choice, that healing isn't forgetting but integrating, that justice isn't revenge but restoration. Every person carries something unique, some burden or gift or experience that, when shared with courage, can change lives. The darkness you've survived can become the light you offer others. Your story, no matter how painful, can be someone else's hope. And love, genuine and sacrificial, creates legacies that outlast any empire built on power. Remember, you matter, your pain matters, and your choice to transform suffering into service can echo across generations. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and tell us what you learned in the comments below.